In a tranquil village, the Clemens brothers, Frank, Rufus, and EMT, target the local bank under the cover of darkness. While the bank staff sleeps at a nearby station, the brothers carry out their robbery. However, a teller discreetly triggers the alarm, alerting the guards. In the chaos that ensues, Rufus shoots and kills one of the men, while Frank and EMT eliminate the rest. During the frantic escape, EMT mistakenly takes Rufus's horse, frustrating him. Meanwhile, Frank suffers a leg injury, which slows them down as they flee across the countryside. With law enforcement likely on their trail, the brothers press on through fields and eventually seek shelter at a horse ranch. Tired and hungry, EMT suggests they steal food and fresh horses, while Frank advises caution. Rufus objects to Frank's restraint, but EMT sides with his more level-headed brother, overruling Rufus's frustration. At the ranch, they encounter Jim Caulder, the owner, who watches them warily. Despite his suspicion, he allows them to rest their horses. However, the situation takes a dark turn when Rufus, acting on impulse, kills Jim, much to EMT's outrage. Furious over Rufus's recklessness, EMT orders him to prepare a meal using the supplies in the house. Rufus, despite making crude and sexist remarks, complies with the demand. While inside, he comes across Jim's wife, Hannie, and immediately alerts his brothers to her presence. When Hannie resists their intrusion, the brothers overpower her. Enchanted by her, they decide to stay at the ranch for the night, drinking heavily. By morning, they depart in a drunken haze, setting fire to the house before riding away on stolen horses, leaving Hannie alone in her grief. After burying her husband, she retrieves his gun and embarks on a journey for vengeance. As Hannie travels on foot, she comes across a man named Thomas Price at an abandoned well. Initially, she regards him with suspicion and attacks him. In search of his belongings, she finds a corpse tied to one of his horses. Realizing that Thomas is an experienced bounty hunter, she decides to learn from him. Despite his warnings against seeking vengeance, she remains resolute in her quest. Seeing her persistence, Thomas provides her with a hat and a water skin before continuing on his way. Undeterred, Hannie tracks him down and follows him until he finally relents. That night, Thomas keeps watch over her as she sleeps, and when nightmares startle her awake, he offers words of comfort, deducing the trauma she has endured. Meanwhile, elsewhere in the wilderness, EMT tends to Frank's wounded leg as they rest in hiding. The brothers argue, with EMT blaming Rufus for their dire situation and even their father's death. Their bickering is interrupted when they spot a posse approaching, forcing them to flee once again. Back with Thomas and Hannie, the bounty hunter provides her with spare clothing and reveals his plan to take her to Mexico to procure a firearm. Together, they travel to a nearby town, where Hannie learns the truth about her husband's killers from the local sheriff. While Thomas engages in a high-stakes game of cards at the saloon, Hannie's conversation with the sheriff draws attention. The mention of Thomas's name causes unrest among the patrons, as they recognize him. When a man threatens him, Thomas swiftly takes action, eliminating the threat and claiming the bounty. Although initially skeptical, the sheriff eventually pays Thomas, acknowledging his reputation. As they continue their journey, Thomas introduces Hannie to Bailey, a skilled gunsmith in Mexico. Bailey welcomes them into his home and begins crafting a customized firearm for Hannie. Meanwhile, the Clemens brothers struggle to survive, their attempts at robbery proving futile. Over the next few days, Thomas rigorously trains Hannie in firearm handling and marksmanship. Though she struggles at first, she gradually improves. However, Bailey notices Thomas's growing attachment to Hannie, though the bounty hunter remains oblivious to his feelings. One evening, after a long day of practice, the two share a quiet moment by the water. Later, Hannie observes Thomas playing with Bailey's children, causing her to reflect on his dual nature. Their peace is shattered when bandits suddenly attack. Thomas and Hannie defend Bailey's home, but during the battle, Hannie hesitates, requiring Thomas's intervention. After the skirmish, the surviving bandits retreat. Meanwhile, the Clemens brothers' continuous failures in robbery force them to move on once more. As Thomas and Hannie prepare to leave, Bailey bids them farewell, unaware that they are being watched by a preacher from a distance. Upon arriving in a town where the Clemens brothers are also headed, Thomas tries once more to dissuade Hannie from pursuing vengeance. However, she remains steadfast in her resolve. Their disagreement escalates into a painful confrontation, leading Thomas to walk away, leaving Hannie in tears. Shortly after, Thomas sees the Clemens brothers entering town. Spotting an opportunity, he confronts Frank while he is alone, catching him off guard. Producing Frank's wanted poster, Thomas demands his peaceful surrender. However, before he can act, EMT and Rufus emerge from the saloon. EMT reacts swiftly, throwing a weapon at Thomas while simultaneously dodging gunfire. A bullet strikes Thomas in the stomach, allowing the brothers to escape.